My name is Viola Pastore, and I'm 29 years old. The night it all began, I thought I was standing at the threshold of forever. The backyard shimmered, like something out of a magazine spread. Strings of fairy lights wound through the branches of the old oak tree, glowing like bottled fireflies against the velvet summer sky. Music drifted softly over the murmur of laughter. Friends and family clustered in little groups, holding glasses of champagne, smiling, congratulating. The air carried the scent of grilled meat, expensive perfume, and blooming roses, a perfect concoction for celebration. It was my engagement party, mine and Antony's. I stood near the makeshift bar, a glass of white wine in my hand, watching him from across the yard. Antony was magnetic, always was. Tonight in the navy suit I'd helped him choose, he looked every bit the man I thought I'd marry. He had that easy charm, the kind that made people lean closer when he spoke, laugh a little louder when he cracked a joke. My chest swelled with pride, with relief. After 5 years of fights and makeups, of late-night promises, whispered under blankets of compromises, big and small, we had made it here, to this glittering moment. My best friend Lena nudged me playfully. "You look like a woman who just won the lottery," she teased. I laughed, heat rushing to my cheeks. I feel like I did. What I didn't say, what I couldn't voice, even to her, was that tonight felt like proof. Proof that the struggles had been worth it, that the doubt and distance we'd sometimes battled were behind us. Proof that I hadn't wasted 5 years of my life on someone who might never settle down. I caught Antony's gaze across the crowd. He smiled briefly, but there was something tight about it, something that didn't quite reach his eyes. Then, with a subtle tilt of his head, he gestured toward the garden beyond the oak tree. A secret invitation. My heart leapt. I set my glass down and whispered to Lena, "Back in a minute." The music faded as I wove past laughing relatives and crossed under the canopy of lights. The garden was quieter, the shadows thicker. The roses along the fence perfumed the air with a heady sweetness. Antony waited there, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Hey," I said softly, stepping closer. "You okay? Everyone's having a great time. You're the star tonight." His eyes flickered restless. He didn't reach for me. Instead, he looked past me, at the half-bloomed rosebush jaw clenched. Silence stretched heavy and wrong. "Antony," my voice cracked. "Talk to me." He drew a sharp breath. "Viola, I'm having second thoughts." The words slammed into me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't even process them. My mind scrambled for a softer meaning. Cold feet, party nerves, some kind of temporary panic. I forced a laugh, though it caught in my throat. "It's overwhelming, I know," I said quickly. "We can sneak away soon, just you and me. No pressure. This party—" "No." His voice cut through mine, low and steady. Too steady. Not about the party. About everything. Us. This. He gestured vaguely toward the glow of lights, the laughter, the life we had planned. My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "We planned this together." "Antony. We." Finally, he looked at me, and the coldness in his gaze stole the air from my lungs. It wasn't fear. It wasn't doubt. It was dismissal. Behind him, near the hydrangeas, I noticed 2 of his friends, Caleb and Jordan, hovering, pretending to examine the flowers, but very clearly listening. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a private moment. It was a stage. "You make it sound so final," I whispered, the betrayal already burning my throat. "That's because it feels final." His tone rose sharp enough for his friends to hear. "I don't know if I want final. I don't know if I want you." The world tilted. The fairy lights blurred into harsh streaks. My knees wobbled, but somehow I stayed upright. He wanted an audience. He wanted me small, desperate, humiliated. And for one terrible second, I almost gave it to him. The pleading words clawed at my throat. "Don't do this. Please." But something inside me snapped. A colder, harder part of me rose up, refusing to let him script my downfall. I in-pastored, deeply steadying my voice. "Okay," I said, my tone calm, eerily calm. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. I stepped back into the glow of the party, lifted a spoon, and tapped it against my glass. The chatter dimmed instantly. 100 expectant faces turned toward me. My parents, his parents, friends with wide eyes. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I said, my voice carrying steady and clear. "But it seems our celebration is premature. Antony has informed me that our engagement is off. Please enjoy the rest of the food and drinks." The silence that followed was absolute, crushing, electric. I felt Antony's eyes boring into my back, but I didn't flinch. For the first time all night, I could breathe. The betrayal was complete, but so was my dignity. Silence can be heavy. That night, when I walked into my apartment, it felt like the silence had weight pressing against my chest, suffocating. I dropped my clutch on the kitchen counter. The laughter, the music, the fairy lights, all of it had evaporated. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I wandered into the living room, but the sound felt hollow. The walls, which just yesterday had been canvases for our future, suddenly looked foreign, too white, too bare, too empty. I pulled the engagement ring from my finger. My hand trembled, but not from grief, from clarity. I set it gently on the coffee table like one might place a fragile piece of glassware and whispered to no one, "It's over." For hours I sat in the dark replaying the night in my head. Antony's cold eyes, his staged performance, his friends watching like vultures. The urge to cry came and went in waves, but the tears never fell. What spilled instead was something sharper, anger, humiliation, a bitter cocktail that burned hotter than sorrow. By dawn, exhaustion gave way to determination. If Antony thought he could script my collapse, he was wrong. I would dismantle our future myself, brick by brick. The first call was to the venue, Ridgewood Events. This is Brenda. Hi, Brenda. This is Viola Pastore. We had October 15th booked. Oh, Viola. Yes, of course. Congratulations again. How can I need to cancel. My voice was steady, detached. A pause, then a softened tone. I see. I'm so sorry to hear that. We'll process the cancellation, the deposit. Forfeit it, I cut in. Please just consider it done. I ended the call before condolences could drip through the line. I didn't want pity. I wanted control. The caterer, the florist, the photographer, each conversation was the same polite, firm final. By mid-afternoon, our wedding plans had been reduced to a string of canceled contracts and forfeited deposits. With every call, I felt lighter, stronger. It was like pulling nails from a coffin I refused to lie in. Then came the pounding at my door. I knew it was him before I even looked. Antony. He stood in the hallway, disheveled but angry. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot. He pushed past me before I could say a word, pacing like a caged animal. You didn't have to humiliate me like that, he snapped. Canceling everything, announcing it to everyone. Do you know how dramatic you made it look? I shut the door slowly, leaning against it. Humiliate you? My voice was low, dangerous. You told me at our engagement party in front of your friends that you weren't sure you wanted me. What exactly did you expect, Antony? That I'd stand there smiling while you tore us apart. He raked a hand through his hair. Frustration flaring. It was a feeling, Viola, a moment of doubt. Everyone gets them. You didn't have to blow it up into what I cut him off. My anger, usually restrained, surged forward. Into the truth. Because that's all I did. I told the truth. You didn't want me, and I won't beg you to change your mind. For a flicker of a moment, I saw panic in his eyes. Not regret, not love. Panic because his script had gone off track. He expected tears, maybe pleading. Instead, he was facing a woman who had already walked away. You're so black and white, he muttered, shaking his head. No room for complexity, for messy emotions. Messy emotions, I laughed bitterly. You turned my life into a spectacle, Antony. That wasn't complexity. That was cruelty. He tried again, softer this time, his voice honeyed with false sincerity. I was scared. I needed reassurance. No! I straightened, stepping closer, close enough to see the faint stubble on his jaw, the stubborn set of his mouth. You needed an audience. You got one, and now you have to live with it. His jaw clenched. You'll regret this, he said finally. But the words sounded hollow, almost rehearsed. I opened the door wide. Get out. For a moment, he didn't move, as if testing whether I'd crack. Then he brushed past me, his cologne lingering in the air long after the door slammed behind him. I locked it, leaned my forehead against the cool wood, and expastored. My hands were shaking, but inside something solid was beginning to form. I walked back to the coffee table, picked up my phone, and one by one blocked his number. His social media, his email. Not out of spite, out of necessity. The silence returned, but it wasn't suffocating anymore. It was mine. The days after Antony left blurred together at first. Mornings bled into nights, nights into mornings. The apartment felt cavernous, like a house stripped of furniture. Every corner whispered reminders of him, the mug he always left in the sink, the throw blanket he used to hog the faint indentation on his side of the bed. But I refused to let grief devour me. Instead, I built rituals, anchors, to tether me to the present. Coffee at dawn, a brisk run before work, a notebook on my nightstand where I dumped every raw thought, every jagged memory, until the pages bristled with inked confessions I'd never say aloud. At work, the pity came swiftly. Hushed conversations that stilled when I entered the break room. Sideways glances heavy with unspoken questions. I mastered the art of deflection, forcing a smile. It's all good. Appreciate the concern. Then burying myself in projects that demanded precision, clean lines of code that never betrayed me. Lena, my best friend, never pried. Instead, she showed up with pizza and cheap wine, curled up on my couch, and let Netflix drone on while we demolished greasy slices. She never once said his name. That silence was the greatest kindness. Weeks stretched into months. Slowly, the sting dulled into a hum, a background ache I could carry. The gym became my sanctuary. Each drop of sweat was a purge. Each muscle ache was proof I was rebuilding piece by piece, stronger than before. Antony's name still floated around our social circles, but always secondhand. One evening at Lena's, she mentioned casually, "He's been seeing that musician girl. Leo's bandmate. What's her name again?" I raised an eyebrow. "Doesn't matter." A month later, Lena added with a smirk, "Didn't last. She bailed when he couldn't keep up with her gigs. Left him on red." I sipped my tea, feeling nothing. No triumph, no bitterness, just indifference. That was my first real victory. Not revenge in the dramatic sense, but the quiet kind. The kind where your absence speaks louder than any confrontation. But karma, I learned, has impeccable timing. At a bar one Friday, a mutual acquaintance cornered me. "Hey, Viola, I heard about Antony. Rough stuff, huh?" "What rough stuff?" I asked, feigning polite disinterest. "Word is his reputation's tanking. A lot of people thought the engagement party stunt was, well, messed up. His friends don't really want to be around him anymore. It's like he burned all his bridges at once." I stirred my drink, my face neutral. Inside, though, there was a flicker of something not joy exactly, but a grim satisfaction. The universe had sharper teeth than I ever could. That night, as I walked home under the city lights, a thought settled in my chest like a warm coal. I didn't need to destroy Antony. He was doing it to himself. My silence, my absence, my refusal to play his game, that was the quietest, sharpest revenge. And for the first time in months, I slept without waking in the dark, without reaching for a ghost. It started small. A text from an unknown number one evening while I was folding laundry. "Hey, it's Antony. I know I probably shouldn't text you, but I was just thinking about you. Hope you're okay." I stared at the screen for a moment. The words were casual, almost friendly, as if he hadn't gutted me in front of 100 witnesses, as if he hadn't tried to rewrite the story to make himself the victim. I didn't reply. I didn't block him either. I simply deleted the message as though erasing a smudge from a mirror. Weeks later came a voicemail, his voice thick, desperate. "Viola, it's me. God, I made such a mistake. I was scared, okay?" Everything felt too much that night, and I panicked. "You were the only thing real in my life. Please, can we talk?" Just 5 minutes. I listened once, then saved the message, not as a keepsake, as evidence, a receipt of the bullet I'd dodged. I played it back only once, studying the tremor in his tone like a scientist examining a specimen. The calls didn't stop, and when I refused to answer, he sent a proxy. One afternoon, my phone lit up with a number I recognized, but hadn't saved Chloe, one of his oldest friends. She'd been at the party, lingering near the hydrangeas, eyes hungry for drama. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Viola," she said, skipping pleasantries, "you need to stop being so stubborn. He's a wreck. He's sorry, okay? Don't you care what this is doing to him?" I blinked, momentarily stunned by the audacity. "Chloe Antony ended our engagement at the party. In front of you, remember. That wasn't who he really is," she pressed. "You know him. He's passionate. He messes up, sure, but you don't just throw 5 years away like that." I felt a cool calm settle over me, the same armor I'd worn the night of the party. "You're right, Chloe. I don't throw 5 years away. He did." Silence on the line. I could almost hear her grinding her teeth. "You're cold," she hissed. "Heartless. After everything you two had, you can't give him another chance. My compassion isn't a leash for him to yank whenever he feels lonely." My voice didn't waver. "His life is no longer my responsibility. Don't call me again on his behalf." Before she could reply, I ended the call. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, adrenaline buzzing under my skin. But instead of anger, I felt something sharper, cleaner. Power. Every no I delivered was another brick in the wall between us, another step away from the girl who almost begged in the garden that night. The next attempt was uglier. My phone lit up past midnight with a rapid-fire series of texts, each one more venomous than the last. Fine, be that way. You were never emotionally available anyway. You're probably still alone and bitter in that empty apartment. I was right to leave. You're nothing but a black hole. I read them in order calmly, as though flipping through a stranger's diary. No tears, no trembling, just clarity. This was the real Antony. Not the charming man in a navy suit, not the boy who once whispered promises on a rain-soaked hike. This was the man who needed an audience for cruelty, who crumbled when denied control. I didn't block him. Not yet. Instead, I took a screenshot of the entire thread. One last piece of proof. Then I deleted it, all wiped clean. Lena asked me the next day if I ever thought about replying. No, I said, simply sipping my coffee, because silence is louder. And in that silence, I discovered a truth. The more he clawed at the past, the freer I became. By the time a full year had passed, Antony was nothing more than a shadow I no longer turned to chase. The texts had stopped, the calls had dried up, and even his proxies had grown silent. My life had become quieter, steadier, anchored by routines that made me feel whole again. It was during one of those routines in art class Lena convinced me to try that I met him. Thomas. He wasn't loud like Antony didn't command the room with flashy charm. Instead, he had a presence that felt grounded like oak roots buried deep into the soil. He noticed the details others overlooked, the way I gripped the charcoal pencil too tightly, how my shoulders tensed when the instructor mentioned expression. "You're not supposed to wrestle it," he'd said with a smile, watching me fight the page. "The lines will come if you let them." I rolled my eyes. "Easy for you to say. Yours looks like an actual vase. Mine looks like a lopsided potato." He laughed, not unkindly, not mocking, just warm. And for the first time in a long while, I laughed with someone without checking for barbs hidden in the sound. Our friendship grew slowly, deliberately. Coffee after class, walks through the park, conversations about books, music, family. With Antony, everything had been urgency, grand gestures, sweeping declarations, fireworks that always burned out too fast. With Thomas, it was a quiet flame, steady and unpretentious. Months later, when he asked me to dinner, I realized my chest didn't tighten with dread or hesitation. It fluttered. Dating Thomas wasn't a performance. There were no curated spectacles, no audience to impress. Just us. We cooked together, burned pancakes together, fought over the right way to load the dishwasher, and somehow it felt more like love than all the glittering chaos Antony ever promised me. When Thomas proposed, it wasn't under fairy lights or in front of a crowd. It was on a hike, just the two of us, rain misting our hair as we stood at the peak. He held out a simple silver ring, his hand shaking. "I don't need perfect," he said, voice low, almost trembling. "I just need us, always us." And I said yes, without hesitation, without doubt, without fear. Our wedding was small, intimate. No performances, no lavish crowd, just family, close friends, and vows whispered with a sincerity that made my throat ache. When Ellie was born a year later, everything shifted again. Her tiny fingers curled around mine with a strength that stunned me. She became the living, breathing proof that love didn't need spectacle to be real. Love could be soft, steady, unshakable. On Saturday mornings, Thomas and I would take her to the park. I'd push her gently in the swings, her laughter bubbling like music. Thomas would sit nearby, book in hand, but his eyes always lingering on us, protective, tender. Sometimes, in those quiet moments, a memory of Antony would flicker a cruel whisper in the garden, the sting of betrayal under fairy lights. But it felt like remembering a nightmare after waking in a sunlit room, a shadow that couldn't touch me anymore. And though I never sought it deep inside, I knew karma wasn't finished. One day the past would find its way back to me. And when it did, I'd be ready. The park had become our sanctuary. It was a crisp autumn morning. Sunlight dripping through the golden leaves, Ellie's laughter filling the air as I pushed her on the swing. Thomas sat nearby on a bench, a thermos of coffee in hand, watching us with that soft smile that still made my heart stumble. "Higher, Mama." Ellie squealed, her curls bouncing as the swing arced forward. "Hold tight, Peanut," I said, giving her a gentle push. Her joy was pure, unfiltered, contagious. I was so absorbed in her laughter that I didn't notice the stillness at first, that prickling awareness that someone's eyes were fixed on me. The hairs on my neck rose before I even turned. And then I saw him. Antony. He stood a few yards away on the gravel path, a takeaway coffee cup in one hand, his shoulders slightly hunched, as though the weight of years pressed down on them. His once sharp suit style was gone. Instead, he wore a rumpled jacket, his hair thinning his face etched with lines that hadn't been there before. For a moment, time telescoped. The fairy lights, the roses, the cruel smirk as he said, "He wasn't sure about me." It all flashed like a reel behind my eyes. He didn't move, just stared. At me, at Ellie, at the life that could have been his, had he not shattered it under the glow of party lights. Ellie noticed him first. She tilted her head curiously, her tiny voice piping, "Mama, who's that man?" I smiled gently, brushing a curl from her forehead. "No one you need to know, sweetheart." I lifted her from the swing and nestled her against my shoulder, her warmth grounding me. When I finally met Antony's gaze again, he had stepped closer, hesitant. His voice, when it came, trembled slightly. "Viola." I gave him the kind of polite, distant smile you'd offer an old neighbor you barely remembered. "Antony." His eyes flicked from my face to the ring on my finger, then to Ellie's hand clutching at my sweater. He swallowed hard. "She's beautiful." "She is." My voice was calm, firm. I didn't elaborate. Thomas stood, then slipping his arm naturally around my waist as he walked over. His presence was quiet, but undeniable, a steady claim, not a performance. "Ready to go, honey?" he asked, eyes only on me. "Yeah," I said, returning his warmth. "We're ready." Antony looked between us, his mask crumbling. I saw the truth in his eyes, regret sharp and bitter. Not the kind born from love, but from loss of control, from seeing me happy without him. I shifted Ellie higher on my hip and turned fully toward him. "Take care of yourself, Antony." It wasn't a blessing. It wasn't forgiveness. It was dismissal. He opened his mouth, maybe to plead, maybe to lash out, but no words came, only silence. And I turned my back on him, walking away with Thomas's hand warm on my back and Ellie's giggle in my ear. For the first time, the silence behind me felt like peace, not emptiness. We walked toward the car, the crunch of leaves under our feet, Ellie singing nonsense songs against my shoulder. Thomas squeezed my side, murmuring, "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I said, and I meant it. I didn't glance back, but I didn't need to. I could feel Antony still standing there, a solitary figure in the park, watching the life he'd thrown away bloom in front of him. Once his absence had felt like a wound that might never close. Now it was just a scar, faded, painless, a reminder of the fire I'd walked through. The greatest revenge was never anger or vengeance. It wasn't slamming doors or screaming matches. It was silence. Indifference. Building a life so full, so steady that the ghosts of the past couldn't touch it. That night, after Ellie fell asleep and Thomas wrapped his arms around me on the couch, I let myself think about Antony for the last time. Not with longing, not with bitterness, just acknowledgement. He was a chapter, nothing more. A story I'd outgrown. I closed my eyes, breathing in the warmth of my family, and felt an overwhelming peace. The girl who once stood under fairy lights, shattered and humiliated, was gone. In her place was a woman who had rebuilt, who had chosen love without spectacle, who had learned that dignity was its own kind of armor. And as I drifted to sleep, I knew with certainty that chapter was closed. Forever. Because my story wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about